Welcome back to Three Dog Studios and another edition of Lessons from My Dogs. Last week I took you back to the 1990s and a dog that I had named Ditto. Ditto was a Dalmatian. She was born in Baker, Louisiana. If you didn't hear about Ditto last week, I would urge you to go back, listen to the lesson about Ditto before you listen to this week's lesson. Just so you have that full picture of Ditto, it will make the story I tell you a little bit more meaningful. But I want to take you back into the 1990s to a day when I was probably trying to give Ditto some exercise without having the kind of experience that I normally had when I exercised with her. Last week I told you about the fact that I had no experience with Dalmatians and I was trying to become a more educated dog owner. And so I was reading a book on Dalmatians and I read a Dalmatian can run several miles without being winded. So you can just imagine, I was a lot thinner then, but taking Ditto for a run was about as much exercise for my arms as it was for my legs. And so, as I said, I probably was trying to find a way to spend time with her and exercise with her without getting winded myself. And so my day was one where I was throwing and teaching her to fetch. I've since learned, as I've had retrievers, that I really probably should not have tried to turn a Dalmatian into a retriever. But she was a dog who was eager to please her master, and so she was doing her best. And I would throw a stick and she would run and grab it and bring it back to me. In fact, for some of that time, she was doing better than I've had some retrievers do. So I would throw a stick and she would bring it back. We were both having fun. And if you know me very well, you know that I like to play a joke every now and then, and so I decided to play a joke on Ditto. And as she was ready to run, I had been throwing just normal size sticks, but I reached back a few feet to where there was a stack of 2x4s. And this 2x4 was probably between 4 and 5 feet long. And I picked up that that 2x4. And I threw it as far as I could. And just like she'd been doing with the sticks, Ditto ran after it. And when she ran after it, she got to where it landed. And she looked at it. And then she looked back at me. And she looked at that 2x4 again. And she looked back at me. And she looked at the 2x4 again. And she circled it. And she wasn't quite sure what to do. And I thought, what is she going to do next? I wonder how many times God asks us or asks that question about us. What are they going to do next? You know what Ditto did? Ditto just happened at that moment to spy a stick like the one I had been throwing, and she ran to it, grabbed it, and brought it back to me. And she was so proud of herself. She didn't bring back the 2x4. I'm not sure she could have. The good news is God never tells us to do something that he's not going to give us the power and the grace and whatever else we need to be able to do it. You know, there's a story in the Bible where, and when I say story, I hope you don't think story, but there's a real event in the Bible where Peter was walking on water. That happened because Peter and the other disciples had been told by Jesus to go out in the boat, and they went out in the boat. He stayed behind alone to pray. In Matthew chapter 14, it's verses 22 through 33. And then they end up in a storm. Winds and rain and waves just crashing up against the boat. And Jesus walks out to them. He knows their dilemma. He knows they're afraid. And he walks out to them, and then they panic because they think they've seen a ghost. And Jesus tells them who he is. And Peter says, Jesus, if that's really you, tell me to come to you. Peter just wanted to be with the Master. And then, you know what happened? Peter's walking on water, but then Peter gets distracted by the waves and the wind. And Peter just isn't able to stay above the water. And the Bible literally is saying that he is sinking down for the last time when Jesus takes him by the hand and pulls him back up. And then Jesus says, "O ye of little faith, why do you doubt?" You see, sometimes we're like Peter and sometimes we're like Ditto. We think that the task that God has given us, the task before us, the challenge before us is too great, and it is. We want to find a smaller stick. We want a calm ocean. Whatever it is, just remember, God will always give you the strength that you need, the wisdom that you need when our desire is to please him and our desire is to serve him. We'll be able to please the Master when we do it in his strength. Don't get distracted by the size of the challenge or the size of the stick. Remember, God's in control and he can do it through you, because the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is the power that lives in us. God bless you and have a great week.